Okay, here we are. We're back. Today we're talking about all things affordability with respect to not just real estate, but just life in Utah in general. It's a question I get I get asked all the time is just what are we doing here in Utah about affordability, especially for those that actually live here and have lived here for a very long time. So today in this video, I'm opening up some things that are kind of relevant right now, things that are happening right now. The first thing that I want to talk about is a new residential development that's been announced. And I think while it may not be the neighborhood where you want to move to, it really is a telltale sign of what's to come in so many areas throughout the state of Utah because it's happening all over the place. Every single week, I'm hearing about another community with another 1,000 homes that are going to go up. So these communities range in size from 1,000 homes up to 10, 12, 13,000 homes. And so I'm talking about kind of on a micro level, I'm going to talk about a specific neighborhood that just was recently announced this week, as well as at the bigger, in the big picture way of thinking, I want to talk about some zoning changes and things that are going to impact Utah's affordability for many years to come. And I think that's really relevant for most people, especially if you're from Utah and you've seen the real estate prices climb to a point where it almost seems unattainable for so many people. And then last, I'm going to talk about an even bigger picture with respect to the economy here and what is the driving force behind what's going to continue Utah down this path of what seems like nonstop appreciation and growth. And to be honest with you, if we look at the next decade or two, that growth doesn't look like it's going to slow down. Now, what it has happened is it has slowed down, of course, since the pandemic. But if you look at other markets around the country, whether that be Austin or places in Florida, or just a lot of places along the Sunbelt states, we've seen those markets really cool off in this last year, year and a half. And here in Utah, the real estate prices remain firm, just gradually. Of course, nothing like what happened just a few years ago during the pandemic. But these are the things I'm going to talk about today. So these types of videos are here for you guys. And I want to make sure that I'm answering your questions. In fact, next week's live video, I'm going to do just that. I'm only making the entire video about questions people have asked me just recently in the comments or through email or in person that have reached out to me. So in this video, whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, just ask questions. Put those in the comments. Ask me any question that you want me to address, and I'll dive right into those answers and make sure that I'm answering those questions. So drop a comment. Also, let me know where you're from as well. And Tony, let's see, and Antoine Stevens. Hey, buddy, how you doing, man? I love hearing from you guys. Thank you for taking the time to comment and ask any questions that you think would be relevant to things that I should probably discuss here on the channel. These live videos is a completely different and unique format where I can actually step right in and be a guide and make sure that I'm answering your questions one-on-one in a very convenient way for everybody to engage. So, all right, let's get started on the first story because these are stories that I feel are incredibly relevant, whether you're looking to move here or whether you live here already. But these are things that are relevant in terms of what's happening in real estate. So like I said, we're going to start with the small picture, and then we're going to move up into the bigger picture as we progress throughout the video. So this first development, this is one that was just recently announced. And prior to showing this development, I want to first share my map here so you can actually see what it is I'm talking about. So if we are looking at the state of Utah and specifically the Wasatch Front, if we zoom into Salt Lake City right here in the Salt Lake City metropolitan area, directly west of this mountain range, this is called the Oquirrh Mountains. If we go just beyond that, there's this entire valley that's actually quite large. It's nearly the size of the Salt Lake Valley. It's actually, it's poised for massive growth in coming years. And it's already starting to take off. And as we drive through these small towns, you can see a lot of the locals don't love the growth that's happening. But to be honest with you, when you look at how much land is here and its proximity to downtown Salt Lake City, this area is going to explode. So this area includes towns like Lake Point and Stansbury Park and Erta, Grantsville, and Tooele. This entire region is in a county known as Tooele County. Now, it's a really difficult word to read and pronounce. It's Tooele, pronounced Tooele. I know it's a really funny word. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where that word comes from. I should probably know that. So I'll have to research that and find out. But this development that was announced is right outside here, which is just about 30 minutes away from downtown Salt Lake City, which means it provides really good access into the city. And most importantly, for so many jobs and the growth that's happening in that northwest quadrant of the Salt Lake City metropolitan area, especially given the massive development of the inland port that's going in just west of the Salt Lake City International Airport. So a lot of jobs are coming into this region of the state. And with access into the city like this, it's positioned Tooele County and the Tooele Valley as a place for massive growth for many years to come. In fact, I would argue that Tooele County and along with Eagle Mountain to the south are probably the fastest growing regions in the state over the next decade or more. I think it's going to continue down this path as there's so much room for growth. So, and here in Utah, we don't have as much land as you might think. When you look at the state as a whole and how much of that state is uninhabitable with desert or with the red rocks of southern Utah in national parks and national recreation areas and monuments and state parks, and then we have all of the mountain ranges, we just don't have as much land as you might think. And so as we look to these areas that are closest in proximity to the city, these are the areas that are best poised for that future growth. So this particular development specifically has announced the development of a 1,260 home community in Erta, which is just right around that mountain. This is that mountain, if you can see where my cursor is, where you'd wrap around this little mountain and boom, you're in Salt Lake City. So this particular development is being led by a company called Coal West. And Coal West is an up-and-coming developer here in the state of Utah. I actually don't know their pedigree. I don't know what projects they've done to a large extent, but what I have seen is communities that they have developed, and they're all done incredibly well. I really enjoy driving into their communities. I actually sold a home in one of their communities in Mountain Green, which is about 40 minutes north of Salt Lake City. But I think it's really cool to see companies like Coal West invest heavily into this area in Tooele County, because this particular area is poised for so much growth, and not just growth with respect to starter homes, but growth in every aspect or every part of the market. So this particular development, again, will have over 1,200 new homes as part of this future mixed residential development. And I think when they say mixed, it's going to have some commercial portion to it as well as other amenities more than likely. And I think that the developments of the future will incorporate a lot of the amenities and the things that people look for in terms of walkability as well. So anyway, Coal West has acquired this land to construct the master plan community located along State Route 36 in Erta. And State Route 36 is the main thoroughfare to get into Tooele. And although it's being expanded, it is one of those areas that gets pretty busy just because the infrastructure will follow the development of the residential communities. As more people come, then the infrastructure will be developed. But this is a 325-acre project, and it's called Echo. So I assume I'm going to be talking quite a bit about Echo as the months and years progress, because it's going to have a mixture of single-family homes and townhomes, open spaces, other amenities, and all of these things. And it's going to be right there in the heart of the Tooele Valley, where so many people are looking to move to find more affordable areas to live, but also to have more space. So these are great places for families. I would imagine that most of the home buyers that end up buying in Echo are going to be doing so because of the need out of family, because people need a little more space and they want that home where they can have that space that they're looking for. So, and of course, Tooele County in general is experiencing tremendous growth. It shows here between 2023 and 2024, this county, this is a typo. It says country, but it's actually county, saw a 3.1% increase in population growth among Utah counties with at least 5,000 people. So again, it's one of the fastest growing counties, and I would anticipate that as their population currently sits at 85,000 residents, and it's projected that it will exceed 100,000 residents in just probably about 7 or 8 years. I think it actually might happen sooner than that, because that's not that many new homes. And I think that that mark that they've set here is probably an understatement, if anything. But this valley, Tooele Valley, is becoming one of Utah's most dynamic growth corridors, and we're going to be seeing a lot of other developments in the region as well. And if I go back to the map here and I show you this particular county, I think it's worthy to note that the driving force behind the growth of this county is going to be the proximity to Salt Lake City. Because if you go north or south of Salt Lake City, you're actually extending further and further from that, from that core of the metropolitan area here in Salt Lake City, whereas this area is probably poised for the most amount of growth, along with this region to the northwest of Utah County, which is Eagle Mountain. Now, Eagle Mountain is a place that I talk about a lot in my videos. It's a place that we're having a lot of clients move to. I've had a lot of clients up in the Tooele Valley as well, but Eagle Mountain is definitely the driving force behind the growth in Utah County, along with Saratoga Springs. But as you can see here, there's a large amount of space as this runs all the way around this mountain range. And this area eventually, who knows, maybe this all gets really developed over time. I could actually absolutely see that happening in the future. Who knows? This is called Rush Valley. I actually have people that live out here, and it's very remote right now, and it feels like you're completely removed. But I can see this metropolitan area really wrapping around this mountain range in the Oquirrh Mountains at some point in the future. Maybe that happens in my lifetime. Maybe it doesn't. But I think that the Tooele Valley development and the Eagle Mountain development will at some point wrap around this mountain. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about in this video about what's happening with respect to residential developments. And it's not just this development. There are developments happening all over the state that are popping up. And I see them about once a week that this new announcement was made and new developments are being made. And part of that is, in my opinion, because of our great need for more housing here and our undersupply, which has created a shortage of about 37,000 homes. I think that's the driving force here. The state is passing bills to help promote and to get developers building again and get them building at a higher rate again. And what that means is we just need more starter homes. We need more homes for people to get into right out of the gate, which will then relieve some stress on the market overall and hopefully impact real estate prices to the point where they stop going up. I know that's not what you want to hear as a seller. If you own a piece of real estate, you want the value of that real estate to continue to go up, but there has to be some balance there. If our real estate gets so expensive that your children can't even live here, can't afford to live here, then what's the point? And ultimately, we're really out of balance with respect to supply and demand. And of course, a large part of that is because Utah is in such high demand for so many reasons that I talk about in countless videos. These are the reasons why these measures have been made in terms of bills that have passed through the legislative sessions in recent years. And we're noticing it's actually happening. We see a lot of big developments happening. Another really big development that was announced recently is to the north of Salt Lake City, where they're going to build a 12 or 13,000 home community right up here just west of Ogden. And this is going to be a massive daybreak style community. And these are the developments that we're going to start seeing a lot more of as the years progress. And as these developments come online and start selling homes, it's going to alleviate the pressure on the rest of the housing market. And it's going to probably be a net positive in the way of houses can be a little bit more affordable. And I don't think what that means is that prices are going to drop. I just think that means that prices will stop rising at such a rapid rate. And I'm hoping that's the case, just so future generations can actually afford to live here as well. So let's go back here. One of the things that I was asked recently as well, in addition to what I want to talk about next, which is zoning, which really impacts how Utah's growth will take shape. One thing that I was asked by multiple people just in the last 3 or 4 days is what is the forecast for Utah? What's going to happen? And of course, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen to the mortgage markets and interest rates and the real estate market. But what I can say is that a lot of people are drawn to the fear-based content that you'll find online. And trust me, you can find a lot of fear-based content. And it's that negative content that really plays into human psychology, because as humans, we're much more drawn to put forth effort to avoid pain than we are to pursue pleasure. And when this content really aligns itself with basic human psychology, and draws you in. That's what's happening all over the place. And I think there's a real fear that some people have that the market's going to crash. I personally don't believe that whatsoever. I think the market's already hit the bottom, and now we're just waiting for the market conditions to play out to the point where it'll take off again. And so I don't see that happening. In fact, that year over year, the real estate prices here in Utah continue to go up, albeit very slightly, but they are still going up. And I think over time, as we look into the future, and we're talking short term here, we're talking 2026 and into 2027, I just don't see a crash happening. I think right now we're in the beginning stages of what is, in my opinion, the best time to buy real estate from now and forever. Because with what happened in the economy during the pandemic and how much money was pumped into the monetary system and the money supply, I just see that real estate prices, they're not going back to where they were, never. And if we just take this snapshot in time and we project ourselves out 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you'll always look back to this year and next year potentially and hopefully as being the best time to ever buy real estate, because I only see real estate going up from here based on what's happened and based on trends, based on history and historical data as well. And another question that I get is, well, is Utah going to continue this kind of growth? We're going to talk more about that in the end of this live video. I'm going to talk more and more about the growth that's happening here and what's driving that growth. But the answer is yes, the growth will continue, in my opinion. And there's a lot of really good reasons as to why. And if we look back in time over the last 25 years, the real estate prices in Utah have gone up on average about 4.3% per year. And that takes into account the bubble that burst from the dot-com bubble, as well as the financial crisis of 2008, which I personally lived through firsthand. I still feel like I'm scarred to some degree, but also the pandemic. And so we've seen the massive surges of the pandemic and the drops during the financial crisis and the dot-com bubble that burst. But I think overall, the market will continue to go up. And I've got some questions here. So first and foremost, Antoine Stevens, I have been looking into Utah for a while, and I have been interested in moving down there, but I'm looking for a nice neighborhood to move to. Okay. Well, to answer that question, that's pretty easy because there are a lot of really nice neighborhoods in Utah. And I think the overall consensus about what makes a nice neighborhood, let me fix my chair. Sorry about that. My chair just fell down. The very most important thing when considering what is a nice neighborhood is very much a personal conversation. So I feel like if we get on a call and we actually talk through it to find out what does that mean to you, I think that's the best way to identify what's the best neighborhood for you, because what's a nice neighborhood for you could be very different for somebody else. And I firmly believe that it's far more important to get to the right city, the right neighborhood, the right community. And from there, we can find you the right house. And, you know, everybody's got their own things, their own pros and cons and reasons to move to a specific area. So I could make the argument that a lot of people are going to be really drawn to South Jordan and Daybreak, where I live, whereas other people are going to hate it. It's just not the right place. In fact, I've got clients right now, multiple clients that are moving here from Seattle, and I could say that none of them are looking for that area in Daybreak. So what's right for one person can be completely wrong for another. And I think the best way to answer your question, Antoine, is let's just have a phone call or a video call and just really get to know your situation, your needs, and your goals. So next up, Joshua Tree Power. I'm seeing price drops in lots of properties. Curious with all this new building. Yes. So one thing that I will absolutely hang my hat on is prices are dropping because sellers oftentimes have unreasonable expectations about what they can get for their home. They feel like that market condition that we've seen change over the last year to year and a half has really impacted the market to the point where people are having to drop their prices tremendously. And so when we look at the big picture and the overall market data, and we see that the real estate prices have gone up 2% year over year, that doesn't mean that everybody's house has gone up 2% in value. What that does mean, however, is that there's a lot of properties that have had to drop their prices even substantially, while others have sold relatively close or exactly at their list price. But overall, when you look at the big picture, it's up a couple of percent. And I think that one of the healthiest things that I'm seeing in the market right now, if you take that really well-established neighborhood and you see those homes priced at whatever the price point is, those prices have had to drop down to get those properties to move, because people are just not moving as much right now as they have in years past. In 2024 and 2025, we've seen the fewest amount of home sales that we've seen in Utah since 1995. So, if you're looking to sell a home, you're competing against other sellers that are also competing for that same buyer pool. And that buyer pool is smaller than it's been since the mid 90s. And why is that? Well, it's interest rates, it's payments, it's the combination of that with the pricing of the home. It's very difficult to get into a home for a lot of people. And therefore, the market is riding this wave. And what we've seen throughout the entire year of 2025, well, I would say spring through summer and now through the fall, the market has gotten softer and softer and softer with respect to what sellers can genuinely expect in getting for their home. And what we look at as market professionals, we look at what's called the absorption rate. And basically, that's a big fancy word for basically the contrast between the supply and the demand in the market. So as we look at that market and we look at what's happening with supply and demand, we take all of the homes that are currently on the market. And if no more homes would come on the market and every last one of those homes had to sell at the rate that they're currently selling at, how many months would it take for all of that inventory to sell off? And for the last couple of months, we've exceeded 4 months of supply. And to put that into perspective, during the pandemic, we had 2 weeks of supply. A healthy market is anywhere from 2 to 7 to 8 months of supply. But really, the only numbers you really have to remember is anything between about 4 to 6 months supply is very much a balanced market. It's very neutral. Prices aren't going to go up. They're really not going to go down. In the macro view, in other words, yes, some houses are going to have to drop their prices substantially, especially if that property has a location that's unfavorable or a feature or an amenity that really pulls the price back, or maybe it has something else that pulls the price up. But overall, prices, when we have 4 to 6 months supply, they're going to remain stagnant over time. And that's where we're at right now. We haven't seen this happen since 2018. And so when you don't have that recency bias of knowing what that market feels like when it's balanced, what it's doing to so many people is it's making them feel like it's a terrible market. It's making them feel like it's a buyer's market. And although when you compare it and contrast it to what happened during the pandemic, yes, it is very much more a buyer's market today than it was then. But I would say that what's happening right now is very healthy. If you look at what happens in a forest with forest fires, and these forest fires ravage through a forest, and it's devastating and it seems so sad, but at the same time, it spurs new growth. And I feel like for the last year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, the market has been through this forest fire period that's really cleansing it. And the only people that are really moving are the ones that really need to move for the most part, or that can really truly afford to. And so as those market conditions shift and the buyer demand comes out of the woodwork because there's so much demand that's pent up, we're going to see that market shift a little bit. My hope as a real estate professional is that it stays fairly steady to where we're at right now. And while every other real estate professional and every other lender will say that they want the market to change, they want it to get hot again because, of course, it helps our pocketbooks because it's easier to sell homes in those markets. And on a macro level, I don't want that to happen. I want the real estate prices to kind of stay where they're at right now. I don't think it's wise to just promote a rising real estate market forever. I think we've already experienced plenty of that. We don't need more of it. So, but you are correct. There are prices that are dropping, and that's definitely very relevant. He also says, love the streams. I understand Utah's unique with all this capacity coming online. There's an overbuilding issue in lots of metro areas. A massive contraction is occurring. Curious on your thoughts. Sorry, I have a really difficult time reading. I should probably wear my glasses when I'm doing these live videos because that screen is so small. So with all of these developments happening and the fear of overbuilding, let's talk about that just briefly. And it really segues me into this next portion of the video that I want to talk about, which is about zoning. The state of Utah is really pushing for it, and so is the governor of the state of Utah, which is Spencer Cox. They're pushing to allow developers to get in and start building more homes here, because if you care about affordability, the best solution to it, in my opinion, as someone who went to college for economics and I study it and I live it and I work in the real estate industry, I think it boils down to simple supply and demand. And you can find people online that will argue that we don't have a housing shortage, and I just don't buy that whatsoever. I think I think it really boils down to, if we have more houses, prices will stop going up. It's very simple. When more people have something that you want to buy, you have more leverage as a buyer. And the opposite is true. If there's scarcity behind whatever it is you're selling, you have more leverage as a seller. And it really just boils down to that. Long term. So if we look into the next year or 2 or 3, yes, new home starts have slowed down. Yes, the economy has slowed down. Net immigration has slowed down. Everything has slowed down, but Utah is still booming. It's still at the top of the list in the country with respect to, it's just consistent. I think Utah always punches above its weight class in so many ways. And part of the reason why is what I'm going to talk about in the end of this video, which is really what drives our economy here and why Utah is positioned and poised for growth long-term, not just in the short term. And so with all those things being said, if we do happen to overbuild a little bit and these builders have to push this product out and they're sitting on too many homes, I think that's actually good for the market because it's going to bring prices down. And what I'm noticing, what builders are doing is they're actually incentivizing people to buy their homes more. So in other words, if they have a home for sale for $700,000 and it's just not selling, rather than drop that price by $50,000 and to get it off the books at $650,000, instead they're selling it at $700,000, but they're giving that $50,000 and putting it in the hands of the buyer. And what that does is it provides the buyer tools in order to get a monthly payment that's much better than if they were to buy that house at $650,000, if that makes sense. I've even had clients choose to ask to increase the price of the home that we're building so that they could get more of that money back and leverage it to buy the rates down and to get into a better situation long-term with respect to their payment. And these builders are doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't want to see the values of their community drop. So if they sell a house for $650,000 instead of $700,000, it shows a downward trend in pricing. What do you think that does to their next home and their next phase of that development? It impacts them. And so they can't really shift. When the market does shift, it's hard to get that price up, not just from an appraisal perspective. So if an appraiser comes in and appraises a property at $650,000, it's hard to sell that same property for $700,000. But also the biggest reason behind everything, of course, is money. And these developers, for the most part, they've got shareholders and investors to answer to. And there's been a massive consolidation in the building market in recent years that, where we used to have this many builders, now we only have this many builders. The same can be said about so many industries across the country, from banking to all sorts of industries. But this consolidation means a lot of the smaller and mid-sized builders are being bought up by the bigger builders, because the D.R. Hortons and the Lennar and the Meritage and different massive building groups, they're trying to compete for that business. And when they do, and they have to build a lot of homes to keep their shareholders happy, they're having to get those homes off the books by pushing incentives. This is why I firmly believe that the best buy in real estate in Utah right now is new construction. Despite the fact that many people don't want new construction and they want to live in those older, more established neighborhoods, but it is the best buy in real estate, and it will continue to be. The question is, if we had 2 to 3 years of very poor market conditions and these builders keep building, could we eventually get to a position where we have an oversupply? Well, currently we sit at about a shortage of 37,000 homes. It's anticipated in the market forecasts with respect to the economic outlooks that we're going to have a 50,000 unit shortage by the year 2034. So every single year since 2008, we've underbuilt for that particular year. There's only been 1 year during that period where we built more homes than we needed to build that year. And that was during the pandemic. And so if we continually underbuild, that shortage just gets bigger, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. I don't see a crash happening. I don't see a hyper oversupply in new construction. I just don't see that happening. Does that mean it's not possible? Of course not. Any black swan event could change everything, and who knows what happens. But I don't see that happening. And I definitely don't see that happening in 2026 because the real estate market tends to move a little bit slow. It takes a lot of months for those things to really happen. So hopefully that answers your question, Joshua. I try to go pretty deep. Doug, how common are duplexes through quadplexes going up for sale? They seem like unicorns around Salt Lake City Metro. Yeah. So for the longest time, we're going to talk about zoning a little bit here in just a moment, but the the problem with duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes and things like that, we haven't been able to build them forever. And I think that's part of the problem, not just here in Utah, but throughout the entire country. If you go to other countries, and I've been to many countries, if you travel the world and you go see other countries and how they build and how they grow and how they live, it's quite a bit better than the United States of America in so many ways. And what I mean by that is, here in America, we build cities and we build sprawling suburbs with big yards, and it's spread out. And when you spread things out, you need more infrastructure. You need more tax dollars to pay for more roads, more streetlights, more all the things that it takes. And you're so heavily car dependent. Now, of course, we as Americans, we're addicted to our cars. It's a way of life. It's a sentiment of freedom. When you turn 16, especially as a male, I don't think that identity of being an American is going to go away. And I don't want it to, actually. I'm a car guy. I love cars, and I think it's a valuable piece to our lifestyle here. But at the same time, it's not really sustainable to continue to build houses on quarter acre lots. It's not efficient. And so many people, not just here in Utah, but around the country, really heavily push back on infill development or multi-unit development or high density housing in every way, shape, and form. And what it's become to be known as is the NIMBY mentality, not in my backyard. And if you imagine every one of these municipalities, the people that vote, the people that push things, they're all for things happening, just not in their backyard. We don't want this. We don't want the new state prison in our city, but we definitely are. We're all for having a new prison built. Just don't build it around us, right? That's a recent thing that we went through about a decade ago, where we tore down our state prison, and that's a different story. That's an extreme example. Of course, no city is going to want the state prison in or near their city, but from a real estate perspective, no city really wants the really high density housing, because the residents there don't want it. But we've got to change and shift our mindset a little bit, because it's going to have to change. What I do see happening, Doug, just so you know, I do think that this is going to shift in the next handful of years. I think there's going to be more options and flexibility and creativity behind the units that we build. I think it's going to change. And we need to, because as I go back to the map, let me go back to this map really quick. Let's see here. Let's go back to the map. Just take a look at this. Look at the Salt Lake City metropolitan area, for example. We're completely surrounded by mountain ranges to the west and to the east and to the south, and the Great Salt Lake up here to the northwest. There's not a whole lot of room for growth. The only space we have here to grow is out on this west bench, which it'll fill up with about 250,000 more residents over the next 20 years. This will all fill up. But for the most part, all we can do is grow up. It's a lot cheaper to build vertically than it is to build horizontally. And if you think of just one house, for example, if you take the footprint of a house and you make that house larger in footprint, meaning you're spreading out horizontally, it's much more expensive. It's more concrete. It's more footings. It's more flat work. It's more roof. Your roofing is much bigger. You can have a home that's the same size with twice as big of a roof. And so by the time you factor in all the costs, it's a lot cheaper to build vertically than it is to build out. Not to mention the fact that we have such a shortage of land here. And therefore land has just become so incredibly expensive. So yeah, unicorns and triplexes and things not unicorns, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, they are kind of a unicorn. There are certain areas around Salt Lake City, and then there's a bunch of them near Orem as well, down in Utah County. In fact, I had a client that wanted to sell he wanted to offload all of his fourplexes, and he had 6 of them down in Orem, and it was a really good area. And all these fourplexes had to be renovated, but they were solid. They were brick structures. They were in good condition overall. They just needed some remodels. But yeah, they're here, but they are definitely more of a unicorn. All right. So hopefully this is all insightful and gives you a little bit of insight about what I think about on a daily basis. Because if I share this with my wife, for example, I think her eyes are going to glaze over. She's not going to be very excited. She doesn't really get into it as much as I do. But the next topic that I wanted to talk about in this video is right here. Let's pull this up. All right, let's see here. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. Let's share this one. Okay. So this is an article that came out, and it's on multiple platforms. So I've read this through and through on many different sources. But Utah's governor suggests overriding local zoning. Could this plan solve or shatter the state's housing future? So, of course, that headline caught my attention. What he's proposing, Spencer Cox, he's floating this bold solution to take the zoning power away from the cities, the municipalities that actually currently and have always been the ones that decide what happens within their city with respect to zoning. But they're talking about taking that away and placing it into the hands of the state. Now, more often than not, pretty much in every way, shape, and form, I would argue that I would rather not have the state in charge. I would rather have my local city or municipality in charge. And here's the problem. Here's the reason why this is a problem. First of all, it's not a popular move. Pretty much any city or resident in every single possible place in corner of the state, they're going to look at this and go, wow, Spencer Cox, the governor, is doing something that they don't like, because they lose control inherently of what happens within their own city limits. And at the same time, for decades, not just here, but around the country, we've hoped that cities and municipalities would come up with good solutions, but they just don't. It's that NIMBY mentality that we talked about. And so because of that, they're contemplating putting it in the state's control. Is that better? Is that worse? I don't have an opinion one way or the other yet. I feel like I need to educate myself a lot more on this topic, but there's a lot of things to consider here. And the governor does share some things that I definitely share with respect to my own perspective, and that's we need more supply. And his message is clear. It's supply, supply, supply. If we don't build more homes, we can't stop prices from going up. We've got to stop prices from going up. And I personally, and I say this in a lot of my videos, I personally believe that the greatest threat to Utah's future is housing affordability. Because as my kids grow up, if they can't buy a home and live here and they have to move elsewhere, that changes the dynamic of what I consider the fabric of our society. We are a family-oriented community. And if our families can't even live here, then what's the point? So I'm really passionate about this. I don't necessarily know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, or maybe there's some hybrid version of this, maybe in the middle, that could really help solve this problem. Hopefully there's something. And the good thing is, and I think this is promising, but I think that my favorite thing about this is not the fact that the state is looking to take over zoning throughout the entire state. My favorite thing is that they're actually trying to do something. They're trying to act, because I firmly believe that government leaders, politicians, as well as business people and just the population in general, we tend to get addicted to education and learning, but we're kind of allergic to taking action and executing. And that formula is never a formula for success. So if we, as residents of any particular city, we talk about all these problems, but we don't actually become part of the solution, then what's the point? Like, it doesn't make any sense. We need action. And so I do love and respect that there's deep conversations happening to solve this problem, which I think is one of the biggest ones that we have here in the state of Utah. So let me go back here. So in essence, it's about going back to the drawing board. How much could this zoning change help? And the question that everybody likes to pose is Utah becoming the new California? And, you know, I would argue that it's not the case. I know that a lot of people like to share that statement that Utah is the new California, but it's just not. I just don't see that nearly, you know, there's really no comparison, especially for those that have lived in California and now Utah. They're so incredibly different, almost polar opposites. So let's move on to the next topic. The last thing I really wanted to talk about today was the impact of the economy here and what's happening currently in our economy here in the state of Utah that's driving all of this growth. And let's see here. Okay, so this is an article that came out, and it's funny because right across the street from me lives this gentleman who used to be the director for the governor's office of economic development. And I read this entire article and I thought it was fascinating and I thought it was really useful. So I thought, let me share this in my live video. And at the bottom, I see that he's my neighbor. That's the one that put this all together. So Ryan Starks is my neighbor. He is the executive director of this economic development corporation here in Utah. And so their vision is to help us to grow responsibly and to grow economically, and to attract businesses to come here and to grow here and to become and integrate with the state of Utah. So the theme here in this article is building together. And so the reason I wanted to share this is because this is why I'm so bullish on Utah's future, not just with real estate, but when you compare it to other states around the country. Why is Utah so incredibly different? And it seems very isolated from the other markets. So when Phoenix or Las Vegas crash and Utah stays pretty steady, why is that? So anyway, this is, to me, it's really fascinating. And it talks about how the Salt Lake City area and market has grown and matured over the last 10 years. We have national and international tenants in sectors such as aerospace and defense, supply chain logistics, e-commerce, medical device manufacturing, advanced and AI manufacturing, life sciences, and of course, tech. We're seeing the growth of new companies as well as existing businesses that have much larger footprints now. And on the development side and leasing side in Utah, we have a general partner, limited partner structure that didn't exist 10 years ago. So, and that's a key component, because when you create the business environment for these businesses to really succeed, that's what fuels the growth. And now, because of all of these things that have happened, it's brought in a lot of capital. A lot of money has come into the state of Utah to help develop these things. And I think it's relevant to understand, when you read articles like this, you really get down to the core as to what's the real reason why Utah is so different than other states and why it's growing so incredibly much. So together with everything else that I talk about on the regular, this is the type of stuff that I look at and read to understand, why am I so optimistic about the real estate market here? And this particular gentleman that was being interviewed for this piece says, we have an extremely well-run state. And for me personally, I agree with that 100%. This is one of the best run states in the nation. State leaders run a balanced budget here, and government stays out of your way. Well, there you go. Utah's nothing like California. They actually run a balanced budget here, which is crazy to think that that's something that you should be so proud of, because it should be just a basic principle, right? He says the state invests in the right things like transportation, infrastructure, and education. The next thing that gives me confidence is Utah's gross domestic product. It's very similar to the US GDP. If you look at each of the different sectors of the economy, we're very well balanced. In fact, Utah has what Natalie, whoever this person is, calls an elite economy. The reason why it's considered an elite economy is because it is balanced. There's not one sector of the economy that really is the only driving force behind the growth. Therefore, when that industry suffers, the state suffers as a whole. But then it also talks about another thing, is that the Wasatch Front is growing. The 4-county region of Salt Lake, Weber, Davis, and Utah counties are on a steady growth trajectory. That's a tough word to say online. Salt Lake City International Airport is another point of confidence. We often underestimate the importance of a well-run international airport. To have a Delta Airlines hub here and the presence of United and American Airlines are their key fertilizers in the Utah economy. About 60% of people around the U.S. fly those 3 big airlines. So we can talk about the airport. We can talk about all of the attractions in Utah. We can talk about what makes this state so incredibly beautiful to begin with. But the driving force behind all of it, and the reason why people want to and can live here, is because of the number one economy in the country, which is right here in Utah. And it's that economy that's the driving force behind our growth. And it really puts things into perspective. And that with that growth comes a lot of growing pains as well. And I'm always mindful of different opinions, and I understand why certain people don't want to see this growth. And at the same time, there's no stopping it. It's going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen. We are poised to surpass 5.5 million residents by the year 2050. 2055? No, 2050. So it's going to continue growing here. And ultimately, if it's not the right place for you because it's grown too much, we might want to consider looking elsewhere or further outside of the metropolitan areas. But overall, I'm personally very bullish on what's happening in Utah as a whole, and I think it's going to be very sustainable for many, many years to come. With respect to real estate and what's happening right now, I just want to emphasize, I do believe this is one of the best times to buy real estate, especially if you're looking at new construction, because it is one of the best times to buy. Builders have discounted their products. They've discounted homes. They've provided the best incentives we will likely ever see. I've sold homes in the last couple of months where I've gotten buyers into new homes that have a 7 or 9% incentive. Think about that. I had a client that bought a $480,000 property, 23 years old, buying their first home. And got 9% of that price back that they could leverage and buy down their interest rate and pay for their closing costs. So the only thing they had to pay was their 3.5% down payment. And then the rest of it, their mortgage payment was drastically less because so much of that money was used to buy down the rate. I've also got other clients buying into homes and getting a 7-1 or an ARM for 7 years where they don't have to pay that full mortgage rate, but they have to be approved for the full mortgage rate once it actually happens. So there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on the real estate market here. Again, I hope that it doesn't go up in price. I don't want to see those prices climb. And for that reason, I'm very much a proponent of new construction and seeing these new developments in Eagle Mountain or Tooele County or up north in Davis or Weber counties. I'm really thankful that there's enough building happening. And based on what happened a couple of years ago with respect to our shortage, I'm seeing the benefits of what the state has done to get some action happening. And action is everything. Just like I can read in the comments here. Action is rare. Agreed. Action is too rare. So hopefully we continue to see more action. And another topic that we need to see a lot of action with is saving the Great Salt Lake. And for the past 3 years, I've seen massive actions there as well. And I really genuinely think that this is what sets Utah apart. We do take action. We solve our problems. We don't look outward and hope that the federal government's going to step in and solve our problems. We actually solve them ourselves. That's something that is, in my opinion, relevant to who the people of Utah are. And Utah as a whole has a culture of working, doing, being industrious, doing the things necessary to make things happen. And again, I'm right here at the core of it. I get to help people each and every day that are looking to make the move to or within the state of Utah. So if that's you, reach out to me, drop a comment below. And if I've earned it, hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. Subscribers gets me in front of more people that are looking for my services to make sure that I can help them as well. So if I've earned it, hit that subscribe button. And if you're looking to learn more about life in Utah, just check out my next videos. And as always, my team and I are here to be your real estate resource of choice. Reach out to us if you need something. We're always here to serve and to educate, not to sell you. And if that's you, reach out to us. My contact information is in the description of every one of my videos. And until next week's live video, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.